Hello everyone. Okay, so today I'm going to be teaching you about some basic information that you need to know before you can even get started creating a server. First off, there's some pros and cons of creating a server, and then we're going to talk about plugins versus mods and the types of servers there are. And if you know this stuff already, then you can just go ahead and skip this video, but I do recommend watching it if you do not know this stuff already. So, first off, the pros and cons of creating a server. Well, the major pro is that you can create anything you want, basically. You can create a server exactly how you want instead of how a different server owner wants it. I cannot even play a server anymore because it just bugs me that it doesn't have exactly what I want. I know I should lower my priorities a bit, but that just goes to show that it's so amazing being able to create your own server. And then you also aren't limited by other servers' rules and restrictions, which, again, a major pro. If you hate how a server does something, you can do it differently on your server. And then thirdly, you can make potential money from your server, but that just really depends. And now for the cons of making a server is that it typically costs money each month. It will typically cost some money for hosting your server or whatnot. This can be as cheap as $1.50 a month, or it can be as expensive as $100+ a month. It just really depends on your server. But generally, most of you will probably not be spending much money starting out, or even for years. If you use plugins, and if you're using mods, it may be a little bit more expensive. It just really depends. Okay, and then next thing, let's see. Oh yeah, okay, so most servers are not going to be able to make a sustainable amount of money from their donor shop. So if you're expecting to make money from your server, you may want to lower your standards a bit. The vast majority of servers that try to do not make money, do not make actual profit. And if they do make profit, then it's not a sustainable amount, and they end up spending more in the long term than they actually make from their server. So just be aware of that going in. Also, it can be very hard to gain and keep an active player base. The first one, when you release your server for the first time and add it to voting sites, you may get a lot of players for the first few days, but most of them are staff hunters, which means they're just trying to get staff so they can abuse their powers, basically. And then a lot of them are hackers and trolls, so just be aware of that. So it's really difficult to get some good quality active players and keep them regularly, and it takes a lot of consistent effort to do so. One sec. Okay, so you're going to be spending a lot of time working on, another con is you may end up spending a lot more time working on your server than actually playing it. This was kind of a unfortunate thing I discovered, is that I ended up spending way more time actually working on my server and fixing bugs and stuff than I did playing it. But that said, it was actually pretty fun being able to work on my server and improve it for other players. And then the next downside is that it's kind of an upside as well, it just really depends, is that you have a responsibility to your players. So this can be a pro or a con, because it can be really nice to have players rely on you, but then it can also be a major downside if you have finals to focus on, or you want to go on vacation or something. Then you can't just abandon your server for 2 weeks and expect everything to be all right when you come back. There are ways to prevent issues while you have to go inactive, such as having some good, trustworthy staff. This can be a major help when you need to go inactive sometimes for a period of time. So I do recommend trying to get a staff team that's pretty responsible. But anyways, so just don't know that you can't abandon your server for a month and expect everything to be alright later on. Okay, And then for my personal recommendations for you, keep in mind these are solely my opinion. Your views on it may vary, so if you disagree with me, don't listen to me. It's as simple as that. So first thing is that I recommend to not create a server if you're just trying to make money. Like I said, it's not going to be profitable, most likely, and if it is, then it's not going to be profitable for a sustainable amount of time. I understand the attraction, and but I mean, you're just most likely not going to make money, so just be aware of that going in. And then similarly, do not rely on server donations for costs, because it's just not sustainable, and no one's going to donate to a server that is going to die in like a month if they can't pay for their server costs. So just be aware of that. Don't rely on server donations. It can be a nice backup, but don't have it be the sole source of money for your server. So next thing is plugins. I guess I should mention this. I also recommend having a clear idea of the type of server you want beforehand in the features that it will provide, because there's a ton of different servers out there, and you should think about how your server stands out as well. Okay, so next thing, plugins versus mods. This has been a pretty common confusion, and totally understandable. There's a lot of overlap. Some mods will provide the same features as plugins, but there are some major differences as well. I guess the first thing I should provide is that plugins don't require any extra setup before you can join. So I can join, one sec. I can join this server that uses plugins without doing any extra work. I can just join it. That's pretty nice, and that really helps you get a player base. At least it's easier to. Whereas modded servers will require you to join, do some setup before you can even join. But there are some downsides. Like, plugins have some restrictions to them. You can't create fully custom items. There's some custom item plugins, but they're pretty restricted. Whereas mods, you can create fully custom items, technology, magic, dimensions, bosses, animals, monsters. There's just so many things you can do with mods. So there are definitely some pros and cons. And plugins mainly focus on like creating game modes like Sky Wars, Factions, Creative, Prison, Survival, Townie. There are so many different types. And they also provide commands like Perk Shop. You can buy perks in this GUI. That's a plugin right there. You can speak and it will give you a prefix. You can have permissions so people can't just type whatever they want. So you can give it to, you can give like specific perks to specific ranks. That's a plugin feature. Whereas mods, everyone gets everything pretty much. There are some exceptions to that, but we will talk about that later on. Okay, so basic difference: plugins don't require any setup before you log in. Mods do. Plugins are a bit more restricted, but in some ways they can also be really good in terms of features, whereas mods focus mainly on adding new content to the game, like items and blocks and stuff. Next thing is the types of servers, and this is really going back to the plugins versus mods. You can only have plugins on your server, or you can only have mods. Generally, they do not work together. So it is really important to know that before deciding which type of server you want, because each type of server only supports either plugins or mods. It does not support both. So first things first, let's see. There's Bukkit, which is it's used for plugins on a server, and it's pretty old, but it's really well known and popular because because it's basically the foundation of Spigot and Paper, which are two server types we're going to talk about shortly. So it's not as popular anymore, but it's just something to know about and know why it's useful. There's Spigot, which is the next type, and it's a fork of Bukkit, which means that it is Bukkit plus additional features, basically. And Spigot is really popular among the plugin community, and they have a really massive community that can help you if you need help. You just go to their forums, and they're so helpful and friendly. I strongly recommend it. This was pretty much my lifeline when I was learning how to create a server, so I cannot recommend it enough. It's perfect for beginners. And then there's Paper, which is a fork of Spigot, which means that it has everything Spigot has plus additional features. Generally, Paper is focusing on adding performance to the game to make it less laggy, but Spigot is actually pretty good at optimization already in general. So a lot of people don't actually need Paper, but it can be an additional nice feature. I'm a little hesitant to recommend this to beginners because their community, I think, is a little bit smaller, or maybe a lot smaller, I'm not totally sure, than Spigot, so their support may be a little bit slower or more difficult to get. Okay, next thing is Forge, which is another server type. Forge focuses on mods, so Bukkit, Spigot, sorry, I'm getting a little bit tongue-tied here. Bukkit, Spigot, and Paper are used for plugins. If you're a total beginner, use Spigot for plugins. Now, Forge, on the other hand, is used for mods, and it's really the only server type I know of, I believe, that is for mods. There is an add-on called Sponge, which allows you to add some plugins to a modded server. Like I mentioned before, normally you can't have plugins and mods together. This is the exception. But it does have some restrictions and downsides, which is why it's not as great as just having like Spigot plugins, for example. Now going back to Forge is that you can get mods and mod packs, which mod packs are just a ton of different mods put together, basically. CurseForge is the website you want to go to if you want to download mods or mod packs. This is the mod packs, and then there's a mod tab that you can use as well. So, my personal recommendations, like I mentioned, if you're a total beginner and you want to use plugins, use Spigot for now. And then once you get a little bit more experience, generally I recommend switching to Paper because it just has some nice features. And I've heard the community is pretty good as well for support, but it's probably not as good as Spigot because Spigot is just so large. Also, I really do like that Spigot provides the server type or the server downloads on its website, whereas Spigot does not. It requires you to use build tools, which is kind of advanced. It's a little bit of a pain. So if you don't want to use that, then you can use GetBukkit, I think it's called. Yeah. There are some websites that you can download the Spigot server. So right here. So yeah. And then if you want to use mods, use Forge. So there you go. The difference between plugins versus mods, the pros and cons of owning a server, and the different server types and why they're useful. Thanks for watching, and see you later.